morning? Because I have to admit, I can't actually hear myself.
Okay.
I have allergies that have swollen up part of my head, so my voice sounds a little strange to me. Hopefully it doesn't sound as strange to you. Many people know that I'm a person in recovery who has been clean and sober now for 17 years from heroin and methamphetamine. And you know, for me as a person in recovery, it really colors how I see the world. It colors how I hear things and how I experience life. And I used to spend a lot of time in places that were called clubs, places that we refer to as the club. And I don't know if you've heard people talk about a club, you might think about maybe a private resort or maybe a private golf club place. You might even think about some Mouseketeers or something like that. But when I think about the word club or the club, I think first and foremost about this little recovery house in Salem, Oregon, a place called the Wilcoma Club, which a lot of people think is a club that's actually a motorcycle club because a lot of the people in recovery there are gypsy jokers and leave their motorcycles parked out front. When I think about a club, I think about an old house with a paved front yard with some cars out front. I think about stained furniture from Goodwill, where they have recovery meetings round the clock through a haze of cigarette smoke. And one day, as I was leaving the club, my truck wouldn't start. And as I was growing in frustration, my friend Tommy, or Crazy Tommy as he was known, came up to me to talk to me while I was standing on the bumper, hunched over into the cab, trying to figure out what was going on and why I couldn't get home. Tommy was a hoarder, and I'd been to his house before, and it was just like maybe the TV show. There were just little paths through his house, through all the garbage and things he had collected. His car was the station wagon, and there was barely enough room for a person in there, and he probably got pulled over because, you know, the windows were clogged up with all the stuff that he drug home every chance that he got. And sometimes Tommy would get to the end of the month and he would run out of his money. And sometimes I would take pity on him and buy things from Tommy that he would try to sell, things I had really no interest in. One time I bought an old car buffer from Tommy. It was junky, and I don't even think the thing actually worked. But you know what? Tommy was having a rough time, and I just wanted to help him out. So I would buy a thing from him here or there. And other people did too. And so while I was working on my truck, Tommy came up to the side, and this time he wasn't even selling anything. He must have been really having a hard time if he didn't even have anything to sell. And more to get rid of Tommy than because I was feeling especially compassionate, I gave Tommy $5 to grab some McDonald's from down the road. And this was just a fleeting moment in a hectic day, something that I quickly forgotten and never would have thought about again, except for later on what happened. So about 2 years later, I was following the Lord, and I had been convicted about tithing. And I had been experimenting with faith and how faith and finances work together. I had actually tried to practice tithing. And for me, how this worked, because I couldn't have a bank account because of my previous issues, was I would just take and cash my check, and I would take 10% of the check, and I would put it in ones or whatever in an envelope, and I would put it in my wallet. When I came to church on Sunday morning, I would put that envelope in the offering plate. And as I was doing that one week, I was kind of in a hurry, and I wasn't really in a very good mood, and it was easier for me just to round up than do the usual math. And I remember thinking something like, oh, well, God, here you go, have a little extra money this week, whatever. And so after I did that, the very next day or the day after that, I went back to the club. And it was the strangest thing. Tommy saw me, and he just made a beeline right for me. And he pulled this $5 out of his pocket. And this is 2 years later after the fact. And Tommy had this $5 bill, and Tommy was a hoarder. Tommy had clinical reasons why he would never give any money to anybody. And he was trying to give me this $5. And he just wouldn't take no for an answer. And eventually I finally took that money from Tommy, and the second that I took that money, I remembered that I had put that extra $5 in the offering plate the week before. And it reminded me that that extra $5 wasn't given for the right reasons. And for me, I took it as a personal message from God, that God could only send in this way that I would understand. That extra $5 that I put in the offering plate, God was returning that to me because it wasn't given in the right spirit. I know that sounds a little bit crazy, but sometimes that's how faith works. When we experiment with our faith, when we're open to God doing something new, things change in some pretty weird ways. And God sent some crazy people our way. I remember that little whatever I had said, and I was convicted by it. So I tell you all this big long story because for me, as I reflected on this experience, I recognized that God was trying to grow something in my heart, but I wasn't ready to understand. God was hoping to change me in a way that I didn't really fully appreciate at the time, but now looking back, I could see what God was doing. God didn't need my money. God wanted my obedience. God wanted my heart to be changed. And I think many of us have moments in our lives where we see the fingerprints of God. We recognize that something is up. Because for me, that moment came when I recognized that it would be a miracle even if Tommy just gave me some money. It would be even more a miracle if he just suddenly remembered something that happened 2 years before. This is one of the most scatterbrained people I've ever met in my life. I mean, that's just something that was for me. Sometimes it takes a few cycles before our hearts begin to detox and the seeds that God wants to plant in us begin to grow, and they produce things that people might notice. So as we talk about our story this morning, I believe that this story is to teach us about God. I believe that God is the sower, and he sows his seeds through us. And he sows his seeds through our actions that God uses to make people aware of the opportunities they have to seek the kingdom of God. And if God is the sower, what is revealed about the heart of God is that God is the kind of God who sows seeds even places he knows they're not going to grow. And I think this points to a big mystery about God that I don't even begin to have all the answers about. But ultimately, I think it tells us something about the extravagant generosity of God. I can understand why some people might look at that generosity and see the shadow side of it. Think about cruelty, things like that. People ask questions like, why does God bother to create people who he knows ultimately will reject him? And I don't have any of the answers for that, but I do have a little part of the answer. I think part of the answer is found in this example of how God sows his seeds, how he calls people to respond to him, even when he knows that they're going to keep rejecting him over and over again. It's easy to see the negative side of this. It's easy to try to find fault with God. But ultimately, I think this story teaches us about how God's grace goes out even to those who don't deserve it. He sows seeds even where they won't grow. He does the right thing even when we reject him, even when we do the wrong thing, even when we reject him till the bitter end. So we're not held accountable for God's choices. We're held accountable for our response to the choice that God has made. And some people reject it in various ways. Some people reject those blessings, and I believe we have the freedom to do that. So I admit, I don't have all the answers about how God sends his invitation out to invite people to this new life that we get to experience. But the answer to the question of where he sends his invitation seems to be everywhere, even the places we might consider to be foolish. Imagine a person in the first century hearing this story from Jesus and thinking, wow, this sower might be a little bit drunk. He might be a little half crazy. Why would someone throw their seed all these places? It's wasteful, right? Immediately they would think this sower is doing something unexpected. And in Matthew's Gospel and the Message version that Cindy read, it tries to explain a little bit about what's going on today. It explains the meaning of the parable. But first, in Matthew, it explains why Jesus teaches in parables at all. He teaches in parables because some people really weren't open to God. They had already made up their mind about what God could tell them and how God could tell them. And the parable explains that it's not about God giving some favoritism and other spite, but that some people's hearts were not open to the new life that God was offering. They were only half-heartedly open. The other half was crowded with other things. They were so open that weeds and other things came and blocked what God wanted to do in their lives. But God's seeds go everywhere in the parable. Humanity's opportunity to respond to him and the fruits of what he wants to do in the world go everywhere. Because the gospel goes everywhere. It goes everywhere that we're willing to take it. And some people really want it, and some people really don't. Some people let worry or fear choke it, or let life's hardships turn their hearts hard once again. Some have allowed weeds into their lives that, like parasites, take away the energy and vitality that God wants to offer them, where they could be working with God and working toward the new life that God wants for them. And so if God is the sower, then I believe our hearts are the soil. And the most obvious implication of this story is the question, what is the condition of my heart today? Is it stony? Is it overgrown? Is it shallow? Is there something in there that needs to be broken up? Is it so trodden down by the struggles of this life that it's like a crust on top of it? As God throws his seeds our way, that they just bounce off to no effect. Is there something blocking God's desire to bring fruitfulness to the very center of our beings? So that's a pretty obvious question. That's something I think anybody who's ever heard a sermon on this passage will think about. And I think it may sound cliche, but in my experience, sometimes the only way that God's grace can enter into us is through the cracks of a broken heart, through experiencing pride come to its bitter end, through recognizing our humility. I think first, before we're ever even open to God doing something new in our lives, we have to become loose enough, vulnerable enough, have our defenses laid down enough that God can actually use us to do what we were made for. If we're open enough, if we're willing to pick some of the gravel out and prepare our hearts a little bit for something that God might want to do, if we're unwilling to let the spiritual resources be wasted on growing thistles and thorns instead of fruit, God will bring spiritual abundance into our lives. Our lives have the opportunity to grow a bumper crop for the kingdom of God, way beyond something that we or anyone else might ever expect. But I will argue that there are really two halves to this story. There is the obvious question about what might be choking out what God wants to do in your life. But there's also the unasked question of if we ourselves want to choose to join in with the supposed foolishness of the sower. Seeds bring life to dead soil, and ultimately they bring along that fruit for a future harvest. And I think we get all twisted up about that because it's so different from the economy of the world. God has this economy of abundance. And we come from a place where we think in terms of an economy of scarcity, where we live by fear and think short-sightedness. Grace is so much different from the dog-eat-dog brutality that we see every day in the world, that we're taught from a very young age. But I can tell you today that tooth and claw have no value to those who are being recreated in the image of God, who are seeking to understand what it means to live as children of God. Love, as God shows it in his example, isn't meant to be looked at like a piece of pie. I think this is a helpful illustration. But with a piece of pie, there's only so much pie to go around. That means if I get a bigger slice of the pie, that means somebody else has to get a smaller slice of the pie. That isn't how love really works, though. And I think as humans, we struggle with this paradigm that there won't be enough love or grace to go around. That if we cut too big of a piece and we're too generous, that we're just going to burn it all up and it's all going to be gone. We think that we should hoard it like my friend Tom. That we should live like camels wandering in the desert, unsure about where our next drink is going to come from or when it's going to come. But I think God wants to free us from all of that and think in terms of the sower. You know, I think a lot of us want to be, frugal and strategic and wise. And I think there's good things that can come from discipline. But the love and grace of God isn't something that works that way. I think sometimes we're just thinking a little bit too small. The sower isn't concerned with how much of the seed's going to be left in the bag for tomorrow. The sower is concerned with covering the ground with seeds for today. And I think that's the kind of perspective that God wants us to take on. If we're always looking for reasons not to show someone the love of God, we will always find them. When we make judgments about what lies underneath the surface of somebody's life and try to play favorites with where we sow our seed, if we start thinking, oh, I don't want to sow my seed there because it's by the path or it's by the weeds or something like that, we don't know the human heart. And when we think that way, I think we're limiting God. We're missing the point of the story, where we're not only called to check the soil quality of our own heart, but to follow the example of God the sower ourselves. The point of this story isn't only about the heart of God, it's also about our hearts. Will we be receptive to God? And not just receptive enough to be passive things that God raises up a crop in, but to be sowers ourselves. Just look at the sower and say, I want my heart to be like that. This is the sentiment of our Quaker forebear, Stephen Goulet, who many people have recognized from this saying that you've probably seen stitched on a pillow somewhere, that I'm going to read for you now. He is probably most famous to non-Quakers for saying this: I shall pass through this world but once. Any good, therefore, that I can do, or any kindness that I can show to any human being, let me do it now. Let me not defer or neglect it, for I shall not pass this way again. That's what people recognize. You've probably heard that or seen that somewhere. But that was this Quaker guy, Stephen Goulet. But the most famous story of Stephen Goulet, if you're a Quaker, if you understand the history of our tradition, is a different story. Stephen Goulet lived this out in a really unique way. He was this person who was called to preach, and he went preaching anywhere the Spirit would lead. And one day, he felt the Spirit of God calling him out to the middle of nowhere, to what looked like an abandoned farmhouse in the middle of nowhere. And he felt that God had brought this sermon for him. And he went out there on his horse, and he preached the sermon from standing on the back of his horse, and then he left. And about 12 years later, somebody walked up to him and said, hey, you're the guy that preached that sermon out in the field, aren't you? And there was another evangelist that God had raised up. And Stephen Goulet said, yeah, how did you know that? And he goes, I was the guy hiding in that old crusty barn out there. So this wasn't just a saying for this guy. This is something that he lived in a radical way. And I think we're all called to live that way to some degree, to let a little bit of that foolishness of God work in us. This is not a call to drudgery and toil that we might suspect. This is a call to live an abundant life with God, a life that's on an adventure with God. At times it's a call to sharing in the disappointments of God as we reach out with God's love and we see people reject that. We see people, and we're constantly disappointed because of all those rejections that we see. That's what the heart of God is like. But it's also a call, I think, to look at someone and to share the love with them and to see the joy of God at work. To see as life takes hold in the dirt of somebody's life and changes it as it begins to grow and bear fruit. So Stephen Goulet was right. We should make the most of the opportunities that God gives us. But some go through life never learning the simplest lessons that we're all supposed to learn in kindergarten. Lessons like how to care and how to share. Lessons like how to enjoy the simple gifts of the moment. How to be grateful for the wondrous joy it is to even be alive at all. And as a person who nearly died from a heroin overdose, I'm fully conscious of that. I know what a precious gift it is to be alive, to share in this moment with you. The last 17 years of my life could have just been completely never happened. I want to look at the example of the sower and the examples of the righteous, though, for a little bit, and look at the connection, because this whole cycle of farming is something that isn't just for one season. It's something that keeps happening over and over again. And it's something where God takes the abundance from the good areas and he brings it down on the bad areas. And a lot of people think, well, that's not fair. How can you give someone else such a big slice of the pie? Where's my slice? But from one generation's blessings, God in his grace gives opportunity to work of a previous generation. And that's the way life works, both in the physical life and in the spiritual life. It's a betrayal in the heart of the sower to try to cling to the seeds and the fruits that we produce. And if we get our way in that, it's just going to choke out the new life that God wants to bring. Our abundance was never simply for our own benefit. It was created to give everyone, everywhere, their opportunity to examine their own hearts, to make their own decision about who Jesus is. But I don't think God wants to only limit us to this perspective of bearing fruit. I believe God wants to move in the direction of becoming sowers ourselves. Not just the kind of sower who's stingy with the seed, worried about having enough seed for tomorrow, worried about whether or not there's going to be too big of a slice of pie that we offer to somebody else. Living our lives in this way is a life that calls us not to keep score, not to prejudge the condition of the soil that we can't even see, to question whether it's worth scattering some seed in somebody's direction. And I think the call to follow Jesus calls us to nothing short to being remade in the image of God. It means spreading the spiritual fruits of our spiritual blessings everywhere. Ultimately, only God knows what's under the surface of someone's heart. And I believe that if we sow the seeds of the hope of the gospel like there's no tomorrow, that God will use that. God will bless the whole world through us. And more than that, I believe that we'll find even more blessings when we're finally ready to share them. When salvation is recognized as the wondrous gift that it is, a gift that we cannot keep to ourselves, but we're willing to share it with anyone that God sends our way, that they might have their chance at the new life that God offers them, because we have already made our choice, and the fruits of that are at work in our lives. So I want to go into a time of open worship. I know we have quite a few new people here this morning who might not understand what this is. The first time I was experienced open worship, I had no idea. Everybody just kind of powered down, and I was like, wow, this is really weird. Am I missing something? And so what we're doing in open worship is we believe that God can speak to anyone, and that God can even speak through anyone. And so in this time, we gather together as the people of God. We listen for God's Spirit at work. And if we feel that God is calling us to say something, we stand and speak. And it's okay if no one speaks. It's okay if we just enjoy that silent time with God. But as we enter into this time, I just want you to be attentive to the things that God wants to grow in your heart, the seeds that was sown in you, and the ways that God might want to use you to bless someone in your life. So we'll just take a moment, and if there might be some pamphlets in the pew in front of you that could be helpful if they're around. So seek that out if you have any questions.